Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 654. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we have a double header. We began the reread of Monotasking by Staffan Nöteberg, and we have an interview with Staffan. Several years ago, I read Staffan's book on Pomodoro, which changed how I work. Monotasking might be even more useful and impactful. We discuss how to apply the ideas in his new book, Monotasking, to improve focus, productivity, and quality of life. Staffan Nöteberg is an enterprise agility coach with years of experience in improving personal productivity. He is also the author of Pomodoro Technique Illustrated, which I also highly recommend, and teaches seminars on monotasking to companies in North America, Europe, and East Asia. Are you ready to focus? It's time for the interview. Staffan Nöteberg, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you for having me here, Tom.
I am looking forward to this conversation. It's funny, several years ago when I was looking at focusing techniques, I think I ran across your book on Pomodoro, and that's my first introduction to you. Today, I'd like to actually talk about your new book on monotasking. Monotasking, it sounds so scary to many people, right? So why don't we start with a definition of what monotasking is, and then we'll spin into how to use it and why it's important.
So for me, it's two things. First thing is the book, which will be released, in a few weeks or something like that in English. And the other thing is a method that is described in this book. And this method is like Agile, but scaled down to one person. So it's not a team method, it's a personal method. And when I say Agile, I don't think of Scrum. I think more like the OODA loop or something like that. So it's observe and orient and then decide, not to plan long ahead or something like that. And I think at heart of this method is this question: what's the best use of my time right now? I think that's a very agile question. It comes from you know about Alan LeCain?
Yes.
Yeah, you know.
I did, but I don't know that my listeners are.
So Alan LeCain, he wrote a book in the mid-70s, 1973 or 74 or something like that. And it's called How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life. And on the front cover it says over 3 million books in print, but I think most people have forgotten about it right now. But Bill Clinton, in his autobiography, in the Preface or something like that, he mentioned this book and said it has a huge impact on his life. So I think a long time ago, it was very important, this book. And in this book, he defines this question: what's the best use of my time right now? So that was like 25 years before the Agile Manifesto. But I think it pinpoints the idea of Agile. What's the best use of my time right now? And that's at heart of this monotasking method. The monotasking method, I try to make it intuitive and draw on cognitive science and also on psychology. So make things more thinking in nudging. So you make it easy to make the right decision instead of saying this is a method where you need a lot of discipline and all of these lists and things like that. And I also try to make this method, or at least, I will also say that it's important, I think, for a method like this to have space for local variation of practice. So it's not like you have to do this, and this. Many processes, team processes, organizational processes, say that we have to do all of these, otherwise it won't work, because things support each other. But here, I think you can try something and see if it works out, and you can try something else, and you need to have space for this local variation of practice. And the book is very practical. So it's things that's easy to try. And when you say monotasking is a scary concept, it sounds scary, this concept, monotasking. I try to broaden it a bit. So it's not only about focusing on one thing. I've seen other things that contribute to this. So I defined 6 areas, or split it into 6 areas. And the first one I called cut down on tasks to do. And if you think in Scrum, maybe the audience here in this podcast is about Scrum, you have your backlog, your product backlog. And if you think about it, if you would estimate the whole backlog, maybe it's years and years of work. And I think most people have these kind of backlogs, personal backlogs. They have a like to-do list, one in the cloud. They have their inbox in Outlook, and they have a lot of other boxes in Outlook or in the mail client. And they have some written on the refrigerator. They have something written, some to-do list, and all over. If they was sum up all these, it will be years and years of work. For different reasons, that's not only how would you say? It's not only self-deceptive. It's also bad. Actually, it blurs your priorities. So what should I do of all these things? You forget about really important things because there are somewhere in your to-do list, maybe not the one that you're looking at now. So the first area is to cut down on tasks to do. And there are methods for doing this. Not the things you're doing right now, but the tasks you decide to do sometime. The second one is to focus on one task now. So that's more like not multitasking. How can you focus? How can you avoid being disturbed by things? And managing interruptions and so. The third one is to not procrastinate. And procrastination is when you decided to do one thing, but you're doing something else for different reasons. Could, for example, be that you're afraid that someone will criticize the thing you would do. So if you don't do it, no one can criticize you. Or maybe it's because you think you're too good at this. So if you do this, people will come to you again and give you these kind of tasks again. There could be many other reasons. But how can you understand when you're procrastinating, but also how can you come up with something good from this? And the fourth one is to progress incrementally. So this is like similar to agile methods or maybe lean, to not make this big bite and have this big thing at a time, but slice out something small, do that thing, and then learn from that and see what the next step would be. And the fifth area is to simplify cooperation. I think that's very important for not multitasking. So you need to understand that you are one piece in a big ecosystem. So if you just focus on your thing, you'll get, the ecosystem will give you so many things to do. If you can't cooperate, if you can't have transparency with others about your priorities, for example, or understanding what people want from you and cooperate and also collaborating. And the sixth one is to recharge creative thinking. And that, because I'm not an expert in health or things like that, but it's about taking breaks frequently, about sleeping, eating healthy, and exercising and things like that. So I'm not the one to give advice exactly how to do that, but being aware that creates the best circumstances to be creative and also to have a sustainable pace. So these are the 6 areas.
Well, much of the corporate culture, at least here in the States, is that people should multitask rather than monotask. And even when you're, many of us have been working from home for so long, I think it is just assumed that the best road is multitasking. Why is multitasking not the right answer?
There's a lot of research showing that when you multitask, you make more errors, you're slower, and also you forget about good ideas because you're doing something and then you're interrupted doing something else, and then you forgot about what you had thought about before. But also, from lean that result will not be as much if you have a high work in progress.
And how did writing the first book on Pomodoro influence this book on monotask?
I don't know exactly how it influenced, but this is a bit different, this method. But Pomodoro is very lean, I would say, very PDCA. So you start in the morning by deciding metric, something that you will measure during the day. For example, the number of external interruptions. And then you work with these time boxes. And by the way, the book by Alan LeCaid from 1973 or 74, maybe it was, is describing Pomodoro exactly. It says, take a kitchen timer, wind it up, and work in small iterations. So he had a lot of ideas there that came back later on. I don't know, maybe he stole them from someone else. But anyway, I would say that Pomodoro Technique is very lean and very PDCA. So you start by defining some metrics, then you work one day, and in the end of the day, you look back and learn something. You have some kind of personal retrospective. It's described in the Pomodoro Technique. And that's very good for some people, I would say. But this is something different. I would say that this is more agile. The more think of right now, right here, what's the best use of my time here, and try to make it more intuitive. And sometimes, especially if you have a lot of variance in your work and a lot of stakeholders, that could be better.
How important to monotasking is the idea of having clear priorities, clear ideas of what you want to accomplish?
I like to think of prioritizing, like prioritizing is what you do, not what you plan to do. So, I mean, if you say, if I say, I prioritize giving up smoking, and then 20 minutes later, and I really think about it, it's really my idea. I really want to give up smoking. I've decided that this is my priority. By 20 minutes later, I have a cigarette in my mouth. Then I would say it's not prioritized. It's more like something I planned to prioritize, but I didn't really prioritizing it. To have clear priorities, I mean, is following your priorities. And I think that there's a contradiction between problem solving or incompatibility between problem solving and prioritizing. It's very hard to do these two things at the same time. So either you're prioritizing, you decide this is what I want to do, or that is what I want to do. You have to see in front of you the different options you have, or else you're problem solving. And while you're problem solving, you have to not question that this is the right thing. Because if you try to problem solve, if you try to think deep and all the time are disturbed by the question, should I do something else? Then you will not be able to problem solve. So have clear priorities and look at them regularly. Like in Scrum, you do it every second week. You look at it again, but not during the day while you're problem solving, while you're programming or doing things like that, or testing or whatever you do. So to have this kind of rhythm where you prioritize, then you think deep about something, then you prioritize, and then you think deep, and then you need to trust your priorities. So having clear priorities makes you a better problem solver, I would say.
This has been an interesting progression to read both books, and especially spend time with monotasking. And I, again, highly recommend it to the listeners. By the way, when is it coming out in English?
1st of June, I think.
How did you get to monotasking? What is the progression that took you down this path to a different way of looking at work?
I think there are numerous things, but the one thing that influenced me is that many of these personal productivity methods, they demand too much discipline. So people say, I really like this Pomodoro technique or getting things done, David Allen.
Right.
And then they read a book, and then they start to put a lot of effort to find the best app for the smartphone to doing this. And then the energy is not there anymore. So they never get started with this method. So I think if I'm doing this to help people, I want to help people, so to support people. And I think for most people, they are not like me. or maybe like you. They're not like engineers that can follow a schedule exactly and have discipline. They want something that is simple and intuitive and that's nudging them so they easily can make the right decision when they have to. Then there's the other thing that I think that it's good if it draws on cognitive science and also on psychology. I see a little difference there between biology and in psychology is more like studying people, and cognitive science is maybe more like looking at evolution and how our brains evolved and why we are like we are. So, but to draw on these two things, I think we can learn a lot from these two fields. So if you have a method that draws on this, it will be more intuitive.
Yeah, that does make a ton of sense. As I read through the book, I was, I think, struck by, well, I've actually tried to incorporate and started to incorporate parts of this into my daily practice. How do you see people actually adopting this and be able to, get that level of personal, and again, even though I don't think it's as much discipline as something like Pomodoro, there's still some discipline required to think through the process. How do you see them adopting this sort of an approach to living and working?
You mean where they were successful, or?
Well, yes. Why don't we focus on them? Yes.
I think I've given a lot of talks about this, for example.
Yeah.
And they'll come back to me afterwards, well, maybe 6 months later or 1 year later, and say, I started with this shortlist thing, and now I do it every day. So that's one thing. It doesn't have to be successful for everyone, but there are a lot of people that tell me that they like this thing. And maybe it's not revolutionary. There are similar things like this shortlist or in other methods, but maybe they haven't tried it before. Another thing is this, I think I call it the auto-insisting tasks, that you end the day in the middle of a task instead of finishing something before you go home, and then it's easier to get started in the morning because you're in the middle of something. That's also the things that people say, I tried this and it really resonated with me. I've done it every day since.
Wow. I guess I missed that. I might I might try that tonight. This has been absolutely.
Maybe you've done it. So in TDD, you have you start by writing the test.
Right.
So let's say that you write the test and then you go home while the test is read.
Okay.
And then the next morning, it won't be that kind of day where you come to work, you know exactly what to do, but first you get a cup of coffee. And then you go back to your computer and then you say, but before I start with this, I need to read the news. And then you start reading the news and you think, well, there's something I remember I saw on Facebook. And then you start digging through Facebook and you find something there, maybe something about Angelina Jolie. And you think, what was the third husband of Angelina Jolie? And then you spend a lot of time researching all these important things about Angelina Jolie. Before it's lunch, then you have to go to lunch. And then you come back and say, now I really need to start with that thing. But then you're too tired. I do it tomorrow instead.
Well, yeah, the world makes it very easy to procrastinate. So anything that gets me over that procrastination hump is probably a good idea. So interesting. Staffan, this has been marvelous. If you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you a magic wand and whatever your morning beverage of choice, caffeinated, uncaffeinated, what would you do with those two wishes to change how people work?
So, I mean, if that would be like supporting them, then I think there are two things. The first one is to cut down on tasks to do. Maybe you don't think about that all the time, but it really makes wonders if you cut down on tasks to do. Being transparent, telling your stakeholders, this is something I won't do because it's too far away in my backlog, instead of keeping it there and not doing it. So being clear on that and deciding not to do it and tell everybody that you won't do this. That's one thing. And I think the second one is that Lacane's question. So to ask yourself every hour, once an hour, or maybe 30 minutes, not more than that, what's the best use of my time right now? Not just doing things because you plan to do them, but keep asking yourself, what's the best use of my time right now?
How hard is that to actually ask yourself? How long did it take you to get to that point where that was an automatic question that you ran through your mind?
I don't know. But maybe you can build it into some kind of process.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think you need the best app or in the App Store to do that. You need something more simple.
Yeah, well, there are certain, if I looked under my desk, there are certain things that I have hanging there that have been hanging there for a while so that I can look at them, rather than talk, right, and things like that. I don't need the best app in the world for that. The yellow sticky notes that stick there until they don't is the best app for that. Staffan, this has been marvelous. How can people continue the conversation? How can they find out about monotasking?
One place to start is monotasking.com. So there you can see, the book is available in every bookstore in the world, probably online, but there you can find links to that. Also, maybe how to continue, or if they want to contact me, they can do it. You can find my address there.
Super. As you know, at the end here, I open up the platform for you to promote anything that you like. Obviously, we want people to go out and buy the book. And if by the time this comes out, it's not actually in the language of your choice, pre-order it so that when it's there, you get it. Is there anything else that you would like to promote?
I'm really impressed that you have done so many episodes of this podcast.
Thank you. Cool. I think this has been marvelous, Staffan, and I hope everyone runs out and buy Monotasking. And if Monotasking is not their way, then look the older Pomodoro book. So thank you again for spending time today and educating and providing a lot of good context to the Software Process and SPaMCAST listeners.
Thanks, Tom.
In Reread Saturday news, as I said, a double header. We started our reread of Monotasking yesterday. The book is 237 pages long, published by Racehorse Publishing, an imprint of Simon & Schuster, and was released in English on June 1st. So many of you may actually be reading this for the first time. The book's contents include a preface, introduction, 7 numbered chapters, an afterword, and then other stuff like the index and more. We're not going to cover that in the reread, but it's really great that it's there. Now, the fun part. Instead of a straight reread and discussion, I'm going to read a chapter, highlight the parts I'm going to implement in the next week, tell you what I'm going to do, and then the following week, admit how well I did it. It'll be a grand experiment. Remember last week we finished Fixing Your Scrum Practical Solutions to Common Scrum Problems? All of the entries are listed in the show notes and will be available. Remember, buy your copy and then read along. In upcoming events, ISMA 18 is a virtual conference June 24th, 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time through 11:15 Eastern Daylight Time. I'm going to be the host of the event. Yay, me! The event will have a host of great speakers on great topics. ISMA 18 is a free event for both IFPUG members and non-IFPUG members. Link in the show notes. The Real Value of the TMMI is a webinar on June 25th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Mark Summers will talk about the usage of the TMMI Test Improvement Framework. Mark is a great speaker. We'll have a good time. I'm going to attend. Link in the show notes. Register today. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we talk to Ajit Guman, Head of Product Marketing at Navar. Ajit and I talk pricing, marketing, product engagement and ownership, and development. Is there an ideal pattern for product and development to work together? If not, what are the consequences? If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?